Welcome back to the Shifting Schools podcast. My name is Trisha Friedman, and on this week we have Sandra Chow as our special podcast series, The Power of Play continues. What I really love about our conversation today is that it's pushed me to think about how play can be such an asset for helping us get better at working collaboratively with our peers. Let me tell you a little bit more about our special guest. Sandra is the Director of Digital and Innovative Learning at Keystone Academy in Beijing. She's dedicated to preparing the next generation for their future. With over 20 years of experience as an educator in Canada and internationally, Sandra strives to prepare students and train educators to be instructional creators in a global community. She's ISTE certified, she's an Apple Distinguished Educator and a professional learning specialist, a Microsoft Innovative Educator Expert, and a Google certified coach. She's an innovator and trainer as well as a global Competence and GCAA certified practitioner. We get into all of her successes and the many awards she's won. Her experience as a professional accountant, educational consultant, and cross-cultural educator provides her with a unique perspective as a leader. Sandra strives to, again, prepare students, train educators to learn, teach, collaborate, and create in a globally competitive society. Before we get into our insights from Sandra on what the power of play has meant for her, we've got a quick word from our show sponsors.
Discover the power of acknowledgement with Libra. In a world where every staff member's dedication shapes the future, recognizing their efforts becomes our mission. Libra transforms your school into a place where achievements, big and small, are celebrated daily, creating a ripple effect of motivation and pride. Join the recognition revolution with Libra, where every achievement is a cause for celebration. For more information and a free demo, contact me at jeff@shiftingschools.com today. Librarians, meet MacEnvision, the future of library management. With a student-centered design, MacEnvision's intuitive interface and seamless navigation ensures that your students find the information they need quickly and effortlessly. Discover how MacEnvision can transform your school at macen.com/MacEnvision.
And with that, let's talk more about the power of play with Sandra. Sandra, you are in a really unique role. And in our series on the power of play, we've been asking folks to weigh in on one myth that they seek to correct through the work that they do. And you've got this really great job title. You are the Director of Digital and Innovative Learning. So how does that give you an opportunity to fight against myths that might be out there about play, the value of play, how we learn from play, or again, like why play matters? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Actually, the title was one that I played with
I love
as one
that.
for my school, because originally it was Director of Ed Tech, and I felt like it was just very limiting to that's my role is just about technology. But when you look about future of education, that encompasses so many things, including design thinking or makerspaces, a lot of things that don't necessarily have digital technology in it all the time. And then, of course, like pedagogy, which I think definitely includes inquiry and play. So play definitely has a big part of what I do. And when I think about myths, one of the biggest myths, and I was reading like various articles on play, prepping for the show, but like the biggest one for me is that play is not just for early years or elementary school kids or younger people. I think I was looking up the definition of play, and in one of the definitions, it even said, especially for those who are younger. And I think that's the myth is play is for everyone. It's so important in middle school and high school development, but even in adults, it's such an important way for us to learn because you interact with people, you engage in problem solving when you're playing. There's just so many benefits when you're playing that you can remember, you can learn better, you can just interact and grow in many ways. That in my role, I do a lot of professional development, and if you want to help people understand how to engage in better pedagogy, what better than to have them engage in it themselves? So I think play is one thing that's super important in all ages and in all aspects of learning.
More with you, especially in light of the kind of learning you're trying to lead. Technology can feel very high risk to people, I think, sometimes. And there's a vulnerability of, I think, trying to think through what a tool might offer in terms of pedagogical benefits, right? Especially if you don't know anything about it. But I think that when you're in a playful state, the
Mhm.
risk doesn't feel as high stakes. Like we might even be a little more willing just to try something out for the sake of trying it out. So I think there's real value, again, for adult learners, for educators. And I love that you pointed out the connections that we can make, because I've been reading a lot about the loneliness epidemic. I've been reading a lot about stress, burnout, I think is something in the educational landscape that we're talking about so much. And I do think that play offers, of course, it's not the silver bullet, but I think it is an important part of that recipe. And I agree with you. I think correcting that myth that adults don't need play is really important. But part of that is also making sure that play can be accessible. Before you and I started the call, we were talking about what public parks can do to make play a little bit more accessible. You're familiar with the area that I'm in now, and I had mentioned to you every winter there's free ice skating rinks, which is wonderful. I'm not a great ice skater, but just by virtue of it being there, it's local and it's free. I've gotten my skates on a few times and just had fun with it. And again, the research agrees with you and I on this. Play is beneficial for all folks, all ages. So then the question does become, how do we give people better access to it? What is something that you would like to see done in order to make play a little bit more accessible?
I think, first of all, I really loved like what you talked about connecting play to well-being. I think it can engage in play and everyone can just really have a lot of fun with just their family, with their friends. During the pandemic, you mentioned the pandemic, on Fridays, I ended up connecting with friends every Friday. And what did we do? We had great food, but we would always play games, whether it be like sock toss, or we played this game called Hey Robot. It was a Kickstarter game, and Jimmy Fallon was talking about it on the talk show. So we started playing various games each week. And it was such a savior during that time where, like you said, loneliness, people were stressed. It was a very difficult time period. And every Friday we looked forward to that time where we would got to gather together. And it was very simple. It talks in terms of accessibility. Most people have socks or something they can toss, even if it wasn't socks. It could be, trash.
Crumpled
And
paper, yeah.
yeah, and so we would just try to get it into a box. And we gave out like little ribbons. My daughter made like fun little ribbons, and I think the person who was last place got a ribbon that my daughter made that said, "Nice try." Being playful and funny and making each other laugh, I think those are really accessible if you just have a little bit of creativity. I'm thinking also about I can't remember the kid's name, but who made the cardboard arcade?
Kane's
Kane's
Arcade.
Arcade.
Yeah.
And he was just in his dad's shop and made play out of cardboard. And so play can be really accessible, but I do appreciate planning that really puts emphasis into making sure there is recreational facilities that are accessible to everyone. Especially in some of the countries, you can have really high ranking in happiness and joy. A lot of those places like Finland, or I've been to, I think it was Norway. All those Nordic countries, they had really great parks with fantastic, weird and wacky playgrounds or sidewalks that have trampolines and you just jump across it. When we were in Taiwan, I loved the parks that we could just easily go to, slide races, and the kids would just run around the park and play tag. I think all of those things are things that are really important that city planners need to think about, is how do we incorporate play into various parts of the city. But in terms of accessibility, if you just have a little bit of creativity as in whatever role you have, you could be a teacher and making sure there's puzzles around your classroom, or a librarian that makes sure there's like little games or chess boards. All of that can be made really accessible to people.
Sandra, you have me thinking about how when this episode airs, folks listening are most likely enjoying some summer break, and how it might be a really great challenge just to be thinking about your own space. And as you were saying, little things can you do or shift so that your home becomes a little bit more conducive to play. And I mention this in part because listeners can't see this, but I'm noticing in your background, there's some art. And I'm thinking, when you have art in your home that you or a family member or friend has created, I'm looking at that and it just almost is subliminally making me want to I tinker with some watercolors. I'm not great at it. It's more about the process for me. But also, my wife and I guess this was maybe a few years ago, we were noticing the board games were always put away in a closet. And so we even forgot that we had them. So now they're out on a bookshelf where we can see them. And again, it's a little bit of a subtle reminder. Hey, why don't you play this game? Why don't you maybe think about inviting friends over to play this game? So it's almost like, how can I just leave hints to make
Mm-hmm.
time for play in my own home? Is that even leave a crossword puzzle out?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes maybe we think, oh gosh, I want to bring more play into my day. Do I have to block out 3 hours? No. Like, it might even be like, leave that puzzle out, like you said. And is it just you're going to spend 10 minutes on it each day? Or like when I'm having my morning coffee, maybe I'm like just trying to find one piece. So thank you for making me think about, like, summertime maybe is a really good time just to take on that challenge of what can we do to design for a slightly more playful life? I don't know.
Yeah, no, and I know I love going to like gift shops or bookstores and like finding little things. And I'm in China, the land of like easy access to Taobao. And I filter through different things. Oh, this would be so fun to buy and just put in the office. Like, we have like an area where people come to find us a lot in our office because they're looking for a coach or help, and IT's right next to us. So they're always looking for people that, like you said, that few minutes that they're there. We have these little wooden blocks that you can stack. At one point, the IT team was like having a competition who could stack the most, and one of them like could stack like 15 up. And
Wow.
but yeah, or those magnetic things that can sculpt into different
Mhm.
shapes, or even those water oil jars that you can easily make your own. But people love to tinker with those things. Like, they're waiting and it's just fidgeting or whatnot. Yeah, they have fun.
I feel like that's such a great alternative to do something tactile and meditative, even if it's just for 30 seconds, rather than pull out my phone, check my email. So I like that alternative is there, it's obvious, and people are enjoying that.
Thank you for tuning in to Shifting Schools. Let's pause our discussion to spotlight Libra HQ, a breakthrough in using AI to deepen connections within organizations. Imagine an environment where every staff member feels truly seen and valued. This is the heart of Libra's mission. Libra transforms how leaders celebrate and recognize the personal and professional milestones of their team members. It's not just about reminders. Libra's AI dives deeper, offering insight into enhanced team cohesion and promote a culture where support and acknowledgement are paramount. Picture a school where every individual is acknowledged, from work achievements to personal victories, creating a culture of appreciation in just minutes a day. In these challenging times, where the demands on educators have never been higher, Libra offers a way for school leaders to lead with true empathy and compassion, ensuring every team member feels an integral part of their community's success. Discover how Libra can revolutionize your school's culture. For a demo, contact me at jeff@shiftingschools.com. Let's build a future where every educator and staff member feels connected and valued. And now, let's get back to our conversation.
Sandra, you've worked with so many different teams. You've had many different roles in what has been an incredibly successful career for you in education, I would say. And I would wonder, do you have any thoughts, all of the different collaborative teams and efforts that you've been a part of, what role do you think play has played in, again, like your story of growing as a collaborator? Has playfulness helped you in working with different teams? Is that something that has always been a part of your work? Or is it something that organically you've developed and cultivated?
I think I know I was reflecting on the question as I was preparing, and I started actually in kindergarten in my career. I was an accountant before that, and we had lots of play as well. I remember as an accountant, we were in Ottawa, and we were walking to the restaurant, and my colleague and I were coming back, and I don't know if you've ever been on, this is my favorite thing. Ottawa, the snow can come up to your waist,
Yes, it
but
can.
sometimes it rains and you get this sheet of ice. It's hard. So if you're careful, you can walk on the top of the ice and not fall and go across, but underneath it's pretty soft. So I remember my colleague and I went across. This was like down in what used to be it was the adult high school. And then we went to a restaurant, and then we went back to our clients, and I was like, oh, let's go on top of the snow. He said, no, we're going to fall through. I'm like, no, we're going to make it. And I remember this very clearly because we were having so much fun. And so we went, and he's in a suit. I'm in this business dress because we were auditing. We're walking on top of the snow. And of course, in the middle of this field, we went, boom. we both fell in, and I was like stuck. But I think if you are around people and other people and you want to have fun, then play becomes inevitably a part of that collaboration. But like coming back to kindergarten, I was mentored by this wonderful lady who was seasoned and retired, and my principal, because I was a new teacher, had paired me up with her, knowing that when your first year as a kindergarten teacher, there could be a lot of areas where you need advice and mentoring. And I remember she just helped me to understand the students so much and how to embed play in all corners of the room. Like, you're basically a crafter of play in kindergarten. And like, how can I make sure every corner becomes an area of play in different formats, whether it be imagination or and role play or water play or sand play, art, different types of art, interactive play and games. Like, you're constantly thinking about play. So my first year was really pivotal in just helping me understand that space. And then quite quickly that year, I got paired up also with a professor from York University, and she was on sabbatical. Her name was Heather Lotherington, and we engaged in this project that became a 5-year project called Rewriting Goldilocks. She was on sabbatical, but we ended up just out of play creating this research out of it where we really wanted our students to learn about literacy. And we started with the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and we ended up, my principal had instilled in us, she was a literacy coach, and the importance of a child. I was in an inner city school, and she instilled in me this idea that every child needs to own stories. And so you have to tell the same story many times to them so that they can really own that and have the language and oral language ability to be able to tell the story themselves. So we engage in this process, but in working with the professor, it was very much about how do we engage in different ways of telling the story, and play became a huge part of it. We had felt boards, we had different versions of the story, many that were funny and rewrites. And then um, this kind of dates me back, but we would start creating digital stories with Kid Pix or Hyper Studio. And that was a huge part of that. Like the kids love playing and creating their own stories. And they ended up creating their own versions of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and retelling it in their own ways, adding dumplings or turning the bears into fish or sharks. And it became we ended up doing this for a few years in different grades and with different stories in the end, and published with the reading teacher. And then she eventually published her research in a form of a book called Rewriting Goldilocks as well. But that also engaged me. This form of play engaged me in research, and that collaboration with somebody else morphed through the years. When I worked with other colleagues, I had this amazing group of teachers that I would work with, and we created many projects together, and it was always let's share, and we would riff off each other's ideas that would be really fun. And we had this one unit where it was like CSI, and it was about rubber chickens, and the rubber chicken had died, and we wanted to figure out who killed the rubber chicken. And it was just fun, and it was us playing off of each other's ideas. And so I would say, if I didn't have that foundational experience of what a really healthy collaborative environment was like, I might not be the same as who I am now, because now that's what I know. My principal had instilled such a love for collaboration with others when I first started, that I bring that into every part of what I do.
Two things that I immediately want to respond to in your reflection. I think it's great that you had that experience, but it also strikes me that you have this inherent value for play. The story that you shared about falling through the snow and you were an accountant. And first of all, transferring from being an accountant to a kindergarten teacher, we could do a whole other episode on that life change. That's massive. But in your retelling of that, it seems like you so deeply understand that moments that are going to matter years later are often anchored in play. When you were recalling that memory, the smile on your face, the palpable emotion all these years later, and I have no doubt it's a strong memory for the other person who's telling that story somewhere else in the world today. And so I think that when we can acknowledge memorable play is, maybe we can better design for it, is a great lesson there. But you also have me thinking a lot about this idea that collaboration needs to be playful. You talked about riffing off of one another and that it's a back and forth. And I am on this pattern now of bringing up my dog into almost every episode. But I feel like I've learned so much about play from my dog, and dog behaviorists say if you're observing dog play, it's healthy when they're taking turns, right? When one dog is not like hogging being the boss of it all, but they're having that exchange too. So I think this is a great thing. You mentioned as an accountant, you would do auditing. And I wonder for collaborative teams if there's almost like a playfulness audit to be done in terms of how often can people riff off of each other's ideas or be willing to step back and really hear maybe a critique of your idea and then a potential solution. And it's, I think, very easy to say, but it is a skill to
Mm-hmm.
hear someone else's idea that might run counter to your own,
Yeah.
to be a willing participant in that exchange for the benefit of the team. It's a mindset that not everybody has. Anybody that's been a collaborator knows this. And I wonder if you've got anything else to say about cultivating that mindset, a willingness to be in that space where you're not taking up all the space, you are taking turns, and you're thinking vision. This is about the team, not necessarily my idea winning. Is there anything that you attribute to your ability to do that or your capacity for that?
I can't say I'm always successful. I do remember some times where, what do you mean you don't want to collaborate? um, there, there are different personalities. And I think when it comes down to it, you have to get to know the people on your team and what kind of play is helpful. I remember, I think it was, I don't remember which article I was reading, maybe the one that you had sent or another one, but just there's different types of play. And some people are individual self players and they're still playing, but they might not be playing in a social way. And that's still okay. People, I think it's just they need, like, when it came down to looking up what play was, I'm just going to read it, the definition, because I found it was really helpful. It was like engage in activity for enjoyment and recreation rather than a serious or practical purpose. And so when you're in a team environment, it's really important to understand people and the characters in your team. And that takes time, and knowing what kind of play is helpful for them. The rowdy, loud type of play isn't for everybody. Board games aren't for everybody. I don't know why, they're so fun, but some people just want to be a puzzle person. And so I think allowing for the different types of play is important. Like you were saying, accessibility. I actually was an only child, so I always have like card games that I have up my sleeve that I've learned as a kid. I used to have this book called 101 Ways to Play Solitaire. So my kids, they're always saying to me, "Oh, I'm so bored. It's so boring." And I'd be like, and my other friend would always say, "Boring people are bored. Only boring people are bored." And so I think it's a matter of helping people understand like different ways that they can engage in play. And then I think you can also be trained to engage in different types of play as well. Being able to engage in board game play takes learning too. How to or lose, how to negotiate, how to read people. That takes learning. And I used to, in math class, do this activity called math science investigations. And it was actually developed by nuns. And it was very much a tactile way to learn mathematics and problem solving. And it was in one of these other times where I was engaging in action research, and I was really fascinated with math science investigation. I had the same principal. I have to give a shout out to her because she's my hero, my educational hero. Her name is Cheryl Page, retired in Toronto, but she had kitty litter boxes, collected those kitty litter boxes for me. And I would just go to this place in Toronto District School Board. They had this place called Arts Junction, like junk. And
Mhm.
a bunch of teachers would always go there and just pick up different types of like materials. So there would be like weird cogs or corks companies didn't want, and there'd be vats of them. So each kitty litter box, I would have like film canisters or weird shapes that I would collect, and then I would name them. Like one was called Thingamabob or whatnot. And so during math science investigations, I would give them a challenge: create 30, like for second graders, create 30 and show it in different ways. So some kids would start creating arrays with these
Mm.
various shapes. Some would create diamonds or like pyramids, or some would create patterns. But it took a while for them to get it, because some would at first start with like just a line. Here's 30. I counted 30. It was a quiet play activity. We would have music, and they would have 30 minutes just to show different ways of 30. And I would take pictures. And if they finished, they'd be like, I'm done. I'm like, oh, great. Try a different way. And it took time, because at first the kids are like, I'm done. And they didn't know what else to do. They just stand there. But doing this many times every week, they got into a rhythm where they could do it like for an hour, that whatever the challenge I give them, and really enjoy it. I guess all this to say can be also a skill that's developed. And I think we were talking about collaboration, but but I think that in doing so, then people can also learn that you can develop those skills of play and then collaborating with each other as well.
Mackin Educational Resources has once again partnered with us for our summer mini-series. Thank you to Mackin for continuing to be a partner of the Shifting Schools community. Their new product, Mackin Vision, is the future of library management. Created with your students' need at the forefront, Mackin Vision offers a user-friendly interface that simplifies navigation, making it easy for students to find what they need. This state-of-the-art system includes features like intuitive browsing, secure multi-level access, multimedia searching, and whole school rostering. Additionally, it has a teacher library portal, aggregated dashboard, live analytics, and centralized reporting. Mackin Vision is designed to streamline your school's library operations. Learn more about how Mackin Vision can benefit your school at mackin.com/MackinVision. Schedule your free demonstration and experience the future today.
I think also you're making me think about how play is an interesting window into some self-awareness and self-discovery, which is super important if you're going to be working with others. So even just you mentioned some people aren't board game people, but board games are now incredibly diverse. So you might not be into the very long, very strategic, lots of layers of rules kind of game,
Yeah.
but maybe you like Wordle, or maybe you do really like that game of Risk that's going to take days and days. But trying out a few different games and just noticing which ones do you enjoy? What is a board game that you enjoy that surprises you that you enjoy it? Yeah, I think that's an interesting conversation to have among colleagues too. Like, what is your relationship with games, with play? And how does that show up in your work? These are, I think, really interesting ways to get to know one another. It dawns on me as you're talking a lot about the experiences you've had in being innovative, in seeing resources in places that maybe others have not, that a lot of that has led to some of your successes. You've won so many different awards for your work with technology. And I'm wondering again, if you see your willingness to, again, technology, I love educational technology too. It can be sometimes frustrating, right? It can sometimes be daunting. And we're now learning and working in an era where it's shifting all the time. Do you feel like your capacity to keep playing with technology, to keep thinking about, I love what you said right from the beginning about it, not necessarily being about the tools, but being very human centered. Do you see your work with tech kind of building on your foundation of being a very playful person?
I think definitely. Actually, most of the awards that I won were collaborative awards because of the school we were in. Again, we were always the same principal was always just pushing us to innovative and try new things. But because we were always working together in collaborative formats, then even our process of applying for the award became very playful. Like one of them was video submission, and we were like trying to think of creative and fun ways to showcase all the work that we were doing in the school, and the kids became a big part of it, and it was so much fun. And we ended up coming up with a theme, building bridges with technology and how we connect with different constituents in the school because of our use of technology. But you have to really new things in order to be called innovative and be willing to see if it works or sometimes not work. And if it doesn't work, that's still a learning process because okay, that wasn't really effective in helping the students grow and learn. I think there's being playful and fun for enjoyment. But in the end, as a teacher and educator, I want my kids to grow and learn. And if it's not helping them learn, then I think that, and I guess that's where that action research is. If it's not helping them to learn and grow, then you got to try something else. And yeah, I think throughout that process, we would try different technology. We were always the ones piloting new technology. And so once you get one company or hardware company knowing that you're already showcasing how this is helpful, then they start giving you free things. And as I shared, it was like an inner city school. So we didn't have a lot of funding from our public system. And our students didn't have family members that would donate a lot of money or through PTA or whatnot. So everything that was provided in our school was oftentimes grants, research grants or donations. And we connected with a lot of companies. And for us, being able to prepare our students for their future was huge. So early on, we got smart boards in every classroom. And in order to learn the technology, we always had sandbox time where you just have to play with it and see whether or not it would work. And I remember when we got access to Google Cardboard for the first time as well. And I had connected with somebody at Google, and he gave me like this big duff. I remember going to Waterloo and showing up at this footstep, and here's the goods, and it was all in this black duffel bag. But it was like phones, Android phones, and the cardboard. And I ended up taking it to different parts of the district, so just so that the kids would have a chance to play with it and experience what it was like. And inevitably, every time it was like, whoa. And so I think you have to engage in risk taking and trying new things, and it could be technology, it could be a pedagogy or a way of learning. But if it doesn't work, it's okay to abandon it and try something else. What you were saying, try different board games. And if it's not a good fit, then try something else. And that's okay too.
Yeah, and I think it's, again, I love that you mentioned, like, it's a sandbox. Sometimes even having the language for where you're at with the process can be a useful reminder in This isn't final decision making time. This isn't having to know all the details, understand how everything functions time. This is experimentation time. And I do really think that is something that we don't necessarily give ourselves enough of, forget about in education, but in our personal lives too. And you have me thinking, bear with me, Sandra, this is like a little bit of a humble brag, but I've started doing this thing in the past few years. And it just dawns on me now that this is almost like sandbox time for what I found out from a different guest. You're right, different people have different preferences for play. And there's also something called intellectual play. And you keep talking about action research. Your face is lighting up. You are also someone who really enjoys intellectual play. So, what I do is I go to the library every week. I'm an avid reader. I have books that I've ordered, that I've requested, that are like on my to be read. But my amazing librarians also curate different books, different themes. And so I've also committed to just checking out a book randomly that I would not necessarily be drawn to, just to see what's there. Like, why did the librarian maybe pull this one in particular? And as you said, doesn't always work. Sometimes I don't finish the book, but I just last night actually finished a book that's called Trash Talk. This is a book that I pulled off the curated shelf by Rafi Kohan. And it's about the role of trash talk in sports in a variety of different sort of realms. And it was fascinating. And as you're probably getting a sense, like I'm very interested in collaboration. And it really dives deep into how some professional sports teams really benefit from having somebody on their team that's super skillful at talking trash. But it's a history of trash talk. It looks at it from different cultures. But if I only were just picking out like the books that I want to read, that never would have come into like my media diet. So sometimes I think it's like we need to take risks. That's not a huge risk, but like how can we disrupt our own patterns and invite these surprises to make their way to us? And I think especially you're leading innovation, right? I'm guessing you also need to be getting sources or connecting with people who are going to get ideas in front of you that you would not necessarily step into yourself. And I'd love to ask you in closing, is there something that you're recognizing you do that disrupts your pattern or your approach? Be it you're always looking for different people to inspire you, or you're always trying to broaden your network. Is there something that maybe comes to mind that you clearly are an intellectual risk taker? Is there something that you're doing that's habitual that you think fuels that?
Yeah, I think it's important to find a network of people that can really stimulate your creativity. I think that's really important. We all think differently and we all have different experiences. And I think in order to grow, it's helpful to have those different perspectives coming into your life to think about how different people might react or enjoy play in a different way or enjoy learning in a different way. And so for me, making sure you're surrounded by people who are, or not surrounded, but at least finding those gems of people that you can connect to regularly who can think differently and help you to in different ways is super important. I'm just thinking like you there are times when you can be a little bit down or Eeyore-ish or just I don't feel like doing anything, and you just need that little nudge. And so it's important to be around others who can be playful and nudge you. And then the other one is just having those different ideas. I think one of the reasons why I was sharing with another colleague of mine why I think it's so important to go to conferences or join groups like Apple Distinguished Educator or Google Innovators or whatnot is because in those realms, I found different people that I can connect with who are playful or who are creative and innovative in their own different ways. And it inspires me to do different things. I went to the 21st Century Learning Conference, I think 2 years ago at Verso, and attended Joel Birch's session on Lego Serious Play. And it inspired me then to, when we were doing our team retreat, incorporate Lego Serious Play into our retreat, into thinking about our goals, into thinking about reflecting on our year. And my team had so much fun, like where we were just building and sharing about our structures. But it was also meaningful. But I don't think I would have thought about it or had the language to think about it had I not attended his session or interacted with other people or even engaged in it myself. So I think it's really important to have those opportunities to be exposed to those different ideas and be around people who will just you spark ideas.
Love that. And I think sometimes too, as a self-proclaimed introvert, I know that going to a conference can sometimes feel like really overwhelming. And it can be, but your anecdote there about Joel's leadership, I've really, as I've aged, I've learned to try and not feel like I've got to do all the things, learn everything, but what is one new learning I can walk away from a conference with? Because I think often when we really try to hone in on quality and what is a thing that I can bring back and build on, that's a much, for me personally, it's a much better goal than trying to get, sometimes the sessions are back to back to back to back.
Mm-hmm.
That example that you gave, I think, is a great illustration of if you hear somebody say, I've only come back with one idea, maybe
Mm-hmm.
that sounds, oh, is that not a good return on investment? Your example there absolutely is like the power of one big transformational idea that you're going to continue to play with can be super powerful.
Yeah. I think, yeah, there's so many conferences I've been to where try one thing. It's so true. Like quality over quantity is always good. And I think the same with finding those thought partners. You don't need 100 thought partners. I think there's the Dunbar number. Sometimes like 100 is the most friends you can have, but like intimate, close friends, maybe three. And I had mentioned to you, Carrie Lee and Clint, earlier during COVID, like during that time, we had this WeChat group that was just the three of us. And we ended up calling ourselves the Get Along Gang after this like childhood cartoon show. But yeah, I didn't need a million people to bounce ideas off of. I just needed two at that time. What are you doing? Help. Yeah.
And I think, Sandra, that's a really great lesson and conversation for you as an adult to be modeling for the younger folks in your life. We had a guest on the show over a year ago who said something that's really stuck with me. She said that as adults, we really need to ask ourselves, what is the story of adulthood that we're telling to children? And she was talking about her research in terms of how there's a real trend, especially in North America, for some of the traveling sports leagues to take over all of the time of the family. And she was saying, if your child never sees you enjoying your own adulthood life,
Mhm.
what's that telling them? And I think your message about having a few close friends is a lot more powerful than having like 1,500 connections on Instagram is again another great lesson. And I love the idea that young people know like that relationship in part was built by play. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I think if I could laugh with whoever I'm close with, that's like the most important. You can be yourself. You can just feel comfortable. And I'm borderline introvert, extrovert. I don't need a ton of people, but if I can have like good people at a conference that I could just sit with and laugh a lot with, then I'm really happy. Or definitely on a Friday night where we can just play sock toss. It's really fun.
All right, folks, that's your summer challenge. Play some sock toss. Sandra, I have no doubt when folks are going to a conference and they're at a table with you, they very much feel like, okay, I've got one person I've connected with who is definitely going to be inspiring. Thank you for talking to us about play, the role that it's played in your career. And I look forward to continuing to follow your journey. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me. It's really fun.